Now we're going to step up the pressure, guys. So we're going to go to even a smaller gauge wire now. Like I said, this was the 2004 Dodge, which is somewhere around 18 gauge to 20 gauge. And here looks like it's going to be about 22 to 24 gauge, I would estimate. And this is from, I believe it's like a 2020 Honda. And you can see that's the OBD port, and you see the wiring coming from it. By the way, these are all crimped in there on these terminals. If you pull them out, you'll see they're all factory crimped. That's what I was referring to. Okay, so now we're going to try and see if it can hold on and crimp these fine wires as well. Okay, guys, we got our wire stripped. Got everything set. Now we're going to go with the FTZ. Make sure we're in the right position. We are. Okay, we got it crimped down to the maximum. And it's in there all the way down. Let's see. Oh, I just pulled right out. So, as you can see, the crimp it made. That's the maximum it's going to be able to do, and that would definitely be insufficient and unable, a definite fail. So high gauge wires like this, forget it on the FTZ, which is one of them. It's rated up to 26 gauge, by the way, as you can see what happened there. Next up is the HKS, right? So let's go ahead and set this up. All right. So you can see that. Got the wire all the way inserted. See that? Now we're going to crimp it down. See what we got here. And that's at its maximum force, and it's right there at the edge of the barrel. Okay, that's actually surprising. It actually did crimp it down on its maximum force. That's pretty good. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I was able to pull it out. Took a lot of force, but I was able to pull it out. And it looks like we might have stripped some wire. Look like I got some of the jacket possibly in there. That could have what gave it some extra strength. I'm going to strip it down past the jacket and redo that test. Okay, I went ahead and cut the cable, stripped it down a little further. So this time we won't be able to take any of the sleeve in there. Let me strip it down some more. It's still kind of going past that. I stripped it far back. You always want to have your sleeve pretty much inside of the this section here, but we did this just for the video, right? All right, so there we go. Now let's do that again. We're all the way in. Maximum. See where we crimped at? We crimped right at the edge of the barrel. You can see that. We could also do another crimp right here, but let's just see how good that did. Just pulled right out. Let's give that 2 crimps just to see what it can do. Okay. All right. See, we're at the edge. Now we're going to go a little further in. Yeah, so now we're a little further in. So we crimp twice at the edge and a little bit further in. Of course, you can go all the way to this line to crimp, and then on your other side, you would crimp the other wire. So let's see if it's any stronger. About the same. So I don't consider that a pass. It would probably work, but I would not put this on anything mission critical. So that basically brings us to the extent of the ratchet and crimp tools as far as how strong and what gauge they can go to, right? So then you're going to say, so then what now? How do you deal with these cables, right? Well, that tells you that the ratchet and crimp tools, currently they're just not capable of doing on these gauge wires the connection that is necessary to provide a factory level crimp, okay? In a case like this, I would recommend going with the heat shrink connectors, these with the solder sleeves, and these definitely are going to solder the wires together, your two wires you have met together in the center. I can show you that a little bit later in the video, but when we're talking about crimping here, so what is the answer to this problem? Okay, here's the answer. Okay, so for crimping, here is what I recommend, right? These are non-insulated crimp terminals, right? So this, for example, is how you would join two wires together, or these, right? Depending on the size of your wire, right? So basically, these are like U-shaped rings. I got a bigger one here just to show you what they look like. You would stick one end of the wire in here, the other end in here, and with your crimp tool, you crimp this down. And these will make a factory crimp that is impossible to strip away, right? Once it's crimped properly, right? So for example, I'm going to show you on the same two wire. That's just to answer the question as far as crimping goes, how to get it done on these gauge wires, factory level, as I consider it, where the wire cannot be pulled out. I stripped away this gray one, and we're going to use this tool, which is not in our lineup, right? But it's the iCrimp SN 2549, and this is great at crimping these. The dies are really well quality CNC machine dies, and the tool is actually pretty good. I like this a lot. So I'm going to show you. I've got the smaller one here, so you can see the size of it. It's like a little U. You could also use one of these. Let me show you. But it's a little bit more work to line it up, but these work fine. You would clip in one or even two wires, even three wires into here. You could do the same thing with this as well, but this is designed really for one wire and one wire on the other side. But you can do like bring in 2 or 3 wires together, or splicing, you know, making 5 wires into one, something like that. You could use these for that. In this case, we're just going to use one. So the first thing I do is close these up a little bit because they're a little bit too open for the tool. So I just use the end of the pliers. I'm going to show you here in a minute. And I just kind of shut them a little bit. As you can see, it just closed a little bit so that it can fit better into the tool, because we're going to slide it. And if you look inside of the teeth of the tool, this is the bottom, where the bottom of the curve would sit in. I'm going to show you. Basically like this, right? That's how it would sit. So you want those teeth at the top that curve down to be at the top of the tool. I mean, at the top of the U, right? But right now, I currently have the U in the wrong position, right? I'm going to show you. You need to have in the smaller portion of the dies, there's 2 portions for the die. So if you can see in the back here, that tooth is actually thinner. That's where your wire needs to be crimped at, down there. This section up here in the front is for your insulated terminal, your insulation on your wire rather. So when you're using these, right, these are designed, your wire will be in the front section here, See if I can get that into focus. In the front section, here's your wire, and this long wings you see up here, this is what holds on to your insulation of your wiring. So insulation is held down and secured here, and these in the front acts just as this that crimps your wire. So this just skips the insulation portion, right? And you can just join your wire with this. So I'm going to get this in the position on the tool. One second here. As you can see, this kind of takes a bit longer sometimes to position. Of course, I'm trying to do this on camera. And got it somewhat back there. It's a little, yeah. So you can see that I have it. You want to have this part right here. This is the side that actually crimps the wire. This side here, the wider side, as you can see, the next tooth up is for the insulation. So you want to have your wire going through that side. So we're going to stick the wire in both ends. This one, of course, is, we did it so long, it's going to stick all the way through, which is not a problem for this test. You wouldn't want to do this, of course. Hold on. Okay, so I've got the red wire all the way through, and now I'm going to feed the gray one in till I get to the insulation. Now I'm going to crimp down. So this is what it looks like. I moved a little bit, trying to keep it in camera, but as you can see, let me get that in focus. You see the kind of crimp it did, what it did to that. I'm going to move it down. What I always do is move it down to the next size, which, as you can see, this decreases in size of the crimp. So we originally crimped here, and now I'm going to move it to the next slot here and crimp it down. And what that's going to do is actually increase the pressure on the wire, and that is going to definitely strengthen that crimp. You want to make sure you're flat. Let me get that in position here. Yeah, so I don't know if you'll be able to see that. I got it now in position there at the back on the smaller end. It's in there. So let's crimp. And there it is, maximum, all the way crimped down. And here you can see what it did. See that? Now this cannot be pulled out. The wire is going to break. I can't. The wire has to break. That's the only way this can come out at this point. Yeah, this is not, it's impossible. I used a lot of force. The wire is going to break. If I had enough weight or something to really force this, the wire itself is going to break before this crimp cannot fail. So this is the actual best way. Of course, you would have heat shrink on the wire where you'd slide it over before you crimped it, and then you would, shrink around it. It wouldn't be, of course, this messy. You would have it all the way to the wire, but this is just for the video to show you how this can be done the proper way to crimp these, right? See if you see that. Yeah, so I lock that focus in. Yeah, so this is, I would consider a factory level crimp. This cannot fail, just like a factory crimp will not fail. Your wire will break before this fails. So this is how you would handle these smaller gauge wires. This is my recommendation, and there's no way you're gonna have any issues as far as with this joint. You'll have another failure somewhere else before you can have a failure here. It's impossible, okay? So I'm going to show you how you can join even different gauge wires using this tool, this connector. That's the one I showed you that has As you can see, the insulation here, the crimp here, and that's what I did here. It's crimped down with the biggest size on that tool there. And I'm going to join this red wire to this 20 gauge wire, right? And that's the 20 gauge wire that came from this box. Just cut a strip out of it. Okay, so I'm going to cut this here, and then I'm going to crimp this in here so you can see. But by the way, with this same crimp, I could have also joined the 20 and the 18 gauge or whatever. It'll still work as well. But this way you have the wire basically separately crimped into the terminal. Daddy. Okay, so I'm going to position this in the tool. First, I need to close in the tip a little bit. It's a little bit too flared. About like that, that's fine. I'm going to position this in the tool. Yeah, so as you can see, this is kind of pretty much flush here. And what's important, you want to make sure on this side that you don't pass where the portion where this goes in. And I've already pre-pushed this in there, preset it to make sure that where I touch on the wiring, the insulation is at the correct depth. Now crimp it down, and as you can see what it looks like. Pretty perfect crimp. And what I do, since this is smaller gauge wire, I then move it down on the die, the next smallest die, and I'm just going to double check the other side and crimp it down. And look at that. And that should be pretty strong. Yeah, this is crimped down pretty good. And I'm pretty sure this is not going to be able to pull out. Let me try to see what's going to happen. That's crimped down. The wire would have to fail for this to break. So this would be, I would consider, factory level crimp. Of course, you would have your heat shrink on here, and then seal that up, and that's it. This is not going anywhere. And look at that. This crimper has some very good dies, and it does an excellent job. I really highly recommend this brand, this model. Okay. By the way, the link will be in the description for this as well, and it does come in at $22.29. Very good tool for these non-insulated terminals. Just to show you at $11.99, we're going to do a test. I'm going to go ahead and cut this wire here and here, strip it, and do the same thing with this tool. All right, I got it in. Go ahead and crimp it down. See how good it does. Not good at all. Look what it did to it. There is another tool from iCrimp. It's the 1424, and that one, it's basically this, but single tooth. It does not crimp the insulation and the actual wire portion at the same time, so it's single, and that works pretty much flawlessly, just like this one. But as you can see, this was a fail trying to crimp this connector. All right, here it is, and I'm going to demonstrate it for you. Like I said, this one, as you can see, it's thinner profile, so you only do one side of the wire at a time. So let me just go ahead and put this in there. Up to the insulation. Then I'm going to crimp it down manually. So you got to put some elbow grease in there, and you can see the crimp it did. And I would just have to repeat it again for the other side. I could also tighten that down. It is crimped in pretty tight. I used it on the 24-22 gauge setting, which is the smallest setting for this tool. Then you would have to do the same thing on the wire insulation portion, which we're going to go ahead and do. Didn't do a very good job. Look what it did. It crushed it, actually. It can do better. It crushed it, but I would definitely recommend this tool. One swoop, and this, I never had any failures with this. Highly recommend it. By the way, forgot to try this on camera, but I was able to just pull that crimp right out. Not that much force, it took it all. I just basically, boom, and popped it right out. All right, now that we got that covered, basically we know on modern cars, this is pretty much what you're going to want to use on, you know, from 18 gauge and up. You're going to want to use either this, the solder seal, which you just heat it up with a heat gun. In fact, I'm going to show you. Okay, I've got my portable torch. You just gas it up right here. This I highly recommend. I've had this for a couple years, and it is my go-to for soldering and heat shrinking on the field or wherever, pretty much. You just put on this sleeve, take off the tip, and let's go ahead and we're going to insert the wires into the shrink sleeve. Okay, so as you can see, there are two ways you can do this. You can leave it where the wires pretty much mesh together. That gives you the highest concentration of the solder actually penetrating through the actual individual wires, or you can join the wire, twist it, and then put the sleeve over it as well. Those two methods of doing it. So in this example, I went ahead and put the sleeve just over the smaller gauge wire, and I'm just gonna basically have the wires mesh together. Just kind of mesh them together like that and try to get the sleeve over it. One second here. All right, so I don't know if you can see the wire in there. If you can see that, that's the wire, the two wires intersecting right there. So at this point, I'm just going to center the solder right between them, and I'm gonna light up my torch. And I just place it in the middle, kind of far to the back. See if you can see that. And I can see the solder is starting to flow. And I've actually had it on a little bit too long. It's kind of hard doing this on camera. There it is. And you want to give that a few seconds to cool. This is not my best work with this, but trying to do it on camera so you can see what's happening. The solder flowed down, of course, gravity. So you want to be mindful of that. If you can use that to your benefit, how you want the solder to flow. It will travel also upstream because there is actual flux in that solder as well. And in fact, I can see it did. So it's still a little warm. Let me give it a few more seconds to cool and harden, because then pretty much it reinforces with this glue here, and it makes the whole connection stiff, and it gives it some strength, if you can kind of see what it's doing right now. Okay, so it's cooled down. So that's what it looks like. Let's see if you can get a good view of that. Yeah, so let me show you how strong it is. This, of course, is never going to beat a crimp, a professional crimp, but that's strong. That's pretty strong. I could hear it. Yeah, and it looked like it actually broke some of the wires. That's pretty good. If you can see that, it actually broke some of the wire. Right there it is. Let me cut that sleeve. All right, I cut it away a bit. Let's see if you can see that. 1 second. So you can see the gold in there, or the copper. That was from the other wire. That was into the really thin gauge. And you can see the solder sleeve and the penetration we did get. So as you can see it right there, it kind of flowed through some of it a bit, but it made a pretty strong bond, and including with the glue and the heat shrink, it's a very good connection. I'm pretty sure you would never have any issues as far as continuity with this this method. I've done this a lot. I use these for exactly these type of connections, so I recommend this one. All right, guys, now that we kind of wrapped up the ratcheting section, which is the method you should always use as far as crimping, because with the ratcheting, you're always going to get a uniform crimp. We're going to go to, or rather repeatable crimp. That's pretty much, you're going to know what you're going to get, whereas you've got varying force when you're using a manual crimper like this.